This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Doug Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships. Hello again, everybody.
Hey.
Hello.
You might notice we have someone else on the screen today.
And you guys are not even going to believe who it is. Oh, you don't know him? Well, let me introduce you.
I feel like I do in like 20 minutes.
I know. This is the one and only Erik Mortimer, and he and I were best buds in not middle school. We were best buds like 9th, 10th, and 11th grade.
So like what, 45, 50 years ago?
Close to it. It was 1972.
It was 1972. No, we are young and fresh, and we're still 16. He was my prom date. I went to your prom. I was 15, and then we went to some homecoming dance.
We did.
And we did. Remember the 70s theme that was like so crazy?
Yep.
But
I saw
Erik,
your polyester suit, Erik.
You're
Still
about
wear
to out me in a really embarrassing story that I feel very defensive about.
Now, is this the story where you were arrested, handcuffed?
No, I was wrongfully accused.
Allegedly.
That's what they all say, Talia.
Talia Rudolph at the time
Oh, God.
had sticky fingers.
No.
And she was shopping for a party.
Lifting.
And she got caught stealing jelly beans.
It was my 15th birthday party, and I was having friends over. But there are people that can corroborate my story. Yes, there was a shoplifting incident with jelly beans. You are not wrong. But I was 100% innocent. Had no idea that it was happening. And then as we were walking out, it was with my girlfriend, Liz, and Emily. If you guys are listening, you're going to be cracking up right now because what happened was Liz, and I'm not even going to say her last name because guess what? She is like a judge. She's like an attorney and then a judge. She went like total...
The opposite way of crime.
Yeah.
Ivy League education. She's freaking brilliant. And this is what happened. She took a bag of jelly beans, stuffed it in her purse, and then Emily and I, totally naive and excited about my 15th birthday party, we walked out of Jerry's Market. And there was some guy, like a secret investigator, fake shopper guy. And he was like, "Excuse me, young ladies, are you planning to pay for that?" And I was like, "What? I swear I didn't do anything. I don't know what you're talking about." And lo and behold, Liz started pulling bags and bags out of her purse. And
where were yours? Where did you hide yours?
So innocent, you guys, misunderstood and innocent. And I still had to cancel my birthday party. I sent everybody away. And it's so crazy to think like my son is 15 right now. I can't even imagine the scenario.
So the story I remember, now this is 30 years of this lie that finally got exposed. There was no stealing of bags of jelly beans. You said you filled up this bag of jelly beans and you ate a couple, and that was considered theft. So you never put this is a testament to your friendship because you never put her under the bus, I suppose. But you made it sound more innocent than that. That is guilty.
Well,
1000%.
Here is what really happened. I did have a bag of jelly beans that I was eating out of. But I did not know that that wasn't what we were getting accused of.
So Talia,
I thought that's
your story already changed your story.
She did change her story. And Talia, I just want to remind you that We're Not Fine as a podcast is about integrity and communication and honesty and transparency and owning your stuff. Otherwise, everybody else has to face it. I believe that finger means something, and I don't know what it means. You'll have to explain that to me. I've never seen it. But I will say that,
it was in Italian.
So all of a sudden, now it's going to go a little bit further, and Erik can corroborate this, but clearly I was eating jelly beans. Oh, yeah, I did actually put a whole bunch of bags in my pants. So I'm not loving this, but we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, let me tell you that.
I am so excited to have Erik on today. I can't even believe. I literally haven't seen you since we were, 18 or 19?
That was 30 years ago.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I mean, I'm only 46.
Well,
did you age faster than me?
Well, I'm 48. I'm 47. I don't even know how old I am.
You're 47.
I tell people I'm 56, and they're like, "You look really good for 56."
Oh my God, that is a brilliant strategy. I'm going to start doing that. Yeah. And they'll be like, "You don't look a day over 48." And I'll be like, "God, you're mean." We are having you on today because you so kindly offered to share your story with us. I mean, basically, I have known you since I was 15 years old, and we were best buds. And then around 18 or 19, right about when I went to college, I feel like our paths just completely drifted away from each other. And I feel like I lost you, and I didn't even know what happened until, and I don't even know how we resurfaced. I feel like it was Facebook or something.
Social media.
Yes. And then I've been following you for years. You've said the sweetest, most supporting things. And I've just kind of seen this transformation where you surfaced and then you said something about I'm clean and sober. And I was like, oh my God, that's what happened. And then I saw you met this beautiful woman, and then you got married, and then you had 2 adorable kids. And I knew that you had 2 other kids from your previous life. And I just was rooting for you and so excited by how everything just seemed beautiful from where I was sitting. And then I was like, I really, really want to know your story. And you're going to tell us. And I'm so grateful.
Well, and I think one of the pieces, and of course we joked a lot at the beginning of all of this, and Erik, you came maybe a half hour ago. I feel like I know you very well already. And I appreciate that you're here today because, substance abuse, dependency, these are topics that our nation is facing in a really big way. I think use is increasing, and so your story becomes really important. One of the things I've always said is that everybody has their own individual kind of experience with this, and I even in our initial conversation, you used words like clean and recovery, and we want to hear all about it. So if you would just start, and thank you again so much for being here, tell us your story.
Yeah, I'm going to try it. Like I was saying before we got on camera, I'll jump all over the place, but I'll start with Talia. When Talia chose success and healthy choices, I went the exact opposite way, so that I disappeared, right? Where active addiction took over my life, and when and how, the disease of addiction, they always refer to as very cunning and baffling, correct? So the disease of addiction doesn't really allow you to see the path you're going on. And it's hard to explain unless if you went through it. It kind of puts a filter on it, like, hey, this is fun. And then at some point in time, it doesn't turns from fun into necessity, where you cannot live without whatever chemical it is, Started using heavily right around that time of 17, 18. And then that cunning and baffling thing, I met my ex-wife at the time. We got married, had kids, and there was virtually little to no use, even alcohol, nothing for 8-ish years.
Wow.
And then we got divorced. And after the divorce, now I got thrown into being the first time really going out to bars or anything of that nature. And then that slow progression from, I always say the first 40 years of childhood were my hardest. So from 30
Oh my
to
God, I
40,
love it.
yeah, right? From 30 to 40, that timeline is very scattered. There's peaks of extremely bad abuse, drug abuse, and then there's also moments of success. But there's always that underlying part of being an addict. And I didn't know I was an addict. I just thought, hey, I was doing good in life. I can afford to relax, do whatever drug I want to, entertain. And then at the last several years of that path, that's when it got to the point where it was out of control. And every day, the only thing I tried to do each and every day was find enough drugs to use for that day.
I realize, Erik, that we have like this series of questions we hope to ask you today, but I want to go off script a little bit because I have a question about that comment you made about success. So I'm curious about, like, not only what did those successes feel like? Were they financial? Were they occupational? Were they relationship? And then, did they momentarily make you feel like you weren't an addict and you didn't have any problems and so you could sweep it under the rug? Is that how that looked?
Yeah, romantic success never until now. But
Okay.
no, financial success. Like I was doing good in my career.
Okay.
I had money to pay my bills on time.
Yep.
But see, it's a misguided success because I wasn't planning anything for the future. It was always just
Right.
what's in front of me, what adrenaline rush it could be, what spending splurge I could afford, all show, no go. Look at me, I'm covering up. And then on the backside of that, the success and materialistic items was covering up that underlying issue of broken, no self-esteem, no self-worth, bipolar disorder, unmedicated.
Wow.
So, when I say success, just to normal people, it's not the same.
Right. It
It's
was
not the
sort of
same
like
picture.
in the moment you were feeling like I've got my shit together and
I
I can
just,
do this.
like I had moments, I wouldn't say clean time or sobriety because, I'd still use, but I won't use as much. Or, I go abstinent for a little bit. And then, hey, I can afford it. I deserve
So
it. You're doing
I'm
good.
I'm thinking about what you were saying about, when you were using pretty heavily at around 17 and 18, but then when you met your now ex, you guys you got married, you started a life together. It sounds like you had kids and it was
Yep,
like
bought a house.
you bought a house. And so for about 8 years, substances were really not an issue in your life until the
No.
divorce.
Yep, and
Wow.
we didn't make that decision. Like we were like little club kids and went to raise my, the mother of my first two children. I should say that instead of ex, but we didn't make a decision to quit. We just and so we kind of just grew up out of it. And maybe that covered up
Wow.
the blind side of me later in life a little bit because I had done a lot of chemicals, but I'm not an addict because I quit. Right?
And would you share a little bit about what were your drugs of choice? Like how did this even happen for
Well,
you? And
I did the innocent drugs, just 18-year-old weed, acid, crystal meth.
yeah, so
There's
innocent.
those innocent ones, yeah.
When I think
Yep.
of innocent, I definitely think crystal meth.
Right? Yeah. So no, as I call them the rave drugs.
Oh
Then,
yeah.
Yep.
and then when I after I got divorced, it was a lot of bar time, and with bar time was a lot of cocaine. And then
Okay.
the cocaine stopped working, or it got too expensive because I had to do so much of it on a daily basis that then it turned into crystal meth. So the last 5 years, that 4 or 5 years was daily use of crystal meth.
In terms
I
of
look
your
at the speaker,
divorce,
right? Go ahead, say it again.
like, I'm curious about the divorce. Did the divorce, because oftentimes people talk about hitting that bottom, right? Did the divorce feel like a bottom to you? Did you feel like
no? It
that
felt
was a
like
turning?
well, I looked at her side of the street and not my side of the street. I was blindsided by it, because I was so, and I'll point back to the addiction too. It's disease of addiction wise, not active use. It's very self-centered disease, right? You can become selfish. Self-centeredness is all around you, and it's all ego. So I didn't see my actions. And now with years clean and years in recovery, I can see my side of the street was extremely dirty. I can see where I was selfish in my time. I can see where I was a parent that was physically there, but not mentally there, because that was all about me, what I had, what I was doing. And then so when we got divorced, I was extremely blindsided. And I don't remember, I don't recall the feelings of, okay, I'm going to drink these feelings away. The self-centeredness point, it was like, I'm free. I get to do whatever I want. I get to go out, and then that takes over to, all right, it's my weekend for the kids. Well, can you take the kids for the weekend? Because I know I want to go use. Right. And then when the narcotics got a grip of me, it was, now I was not a present physical parent, and I was far from being emotionally or, supportive at all during those times.
I mean, what you said, that just floors me. I mean, it makes so much sense, but it's almost like when you said that when you're on this path, which to some might look like this downward spiral, or that it's so much easier to watch somebody else and be like, ooh, this is like going nowhere good. But when you said that when you're in that moment, you can't even see the path that you're on. But I'm also thinking about when you were saying that even when you were doing well, it felt like maybe the headlights didn't go out much further than like today.
Not further than my nose.
Right. Which is like,
Right?
I wonder if that's like something, it's the same question of, you're on this path that starts by feeling really good. You're footloose and fancy free. There was probably a little bit of like revenge freedom in there. Like, fuck you. Now I get to do whatever I want. And I don't want
of that.
right. And then when did you start feeling like, this might actually be a problem, or this is no longer fun? I think it's got its grip on me.
I was trying to recall this, my feelings going through, especially when the crystal meth hit again for the second time later in life there, mid 30s, a real popular decision when you're in your mid 30s to start doing crystal meth. I know it's most people can relate, right?
Yeah, sure. Super relatable. I mean, everyone's got their
choice.
vices.
I'm so happy. When that got reintroduced, and to the point where I saw the destruction was heading to where it was the day I got clean. I didn't see it, and this might not be for every addict. You wake up and you might go to stay awake for several days. And some point in there, I'm sure I had thoughts of I don't want to get high the next day, blah blah blah. But I don't recall those feelings. I don't. I just knew I needed to make sure I had drugs on me for the next day. And I would do anything to make sure that would happen. The thing with addiction, like when you start doing different drugs, you open up a door that you can't see behind. And now instead of just another split path, there's 10 different paths behind that door that before you open it said, I would never do anything of those natures, so now you open up this door to, stealing, lying, manipulating, to robbing, hurting, that, I'm like, oh, I'll never do any of those things. But addiction will make you open every single door in order to keep using drugs.
And not just jelly beans is what I'm assuming.
Not just jelly, yeah.
I'm so misunderstood.
You're really not.
Erik, I don't understand how, so what you're saying is there was no real bottom that you hit?
Well, there's a date, it was I thought this was going to be my bottom, right? So I was arrested on my way to my daughter's birthday party. I was taking her and her friends out. It was November 2013, right? And I'm sitting in the back of the police car, and they're going through. This is a weird story. This is kind of a sad story. So my oldest son's a type 1 diabetic. And so when I reached in to grab my registration, there was insulin needles. I was never an IV user, but there's insulin needles, and that gave him, grounds to search the vehicle. So I knew what they were going to find. So I'm in the back of the police car, and they're searching my car. I know I'm in trouble. And at that moment, I was like, oh my God, I'm free. I can get help.
Oh
so
my
that was my first. Knew where my life was going to have a lot of trouble. I'm going to have a lot of explaining. However, I am free. I'm done lying. I'm done, because up until then, I never got DWIs. I never had drug possession charges. I never got busted, right? And I was dealing, and I was, high, driving around 24/7, but I had no repercussion through the law.
Wow.
They go to the jail. I get there as I'm getting booked in. Two Washington County narcotics detectives pull me aside, and my name must be on their radar, had come up quite a bit for associations. And they go, well, here, we can make you a deal that if you turn in 3 people, we drop the charges. And I was just in the back of the cop car crying, thanking God that I'm free.
Yep.
They give me this option. My first question to them was, do you drug test on this program? They said no. Okay, I'll do it. And I left jail and went and got high. I didn't get clean until January 5th, 2015. So well over a year later, 14 months later is finally when I got clean. So I had that, that God moment in the back of the cop car, to an hour later offered this deal that I could still use, because I knew the court systems. You get busted, they're going to put you on what they call the color wheel, drug test you can't use, you're going to get more in trouble. Well, now that the addiction took over and said, hey, you're okay to use.
Right.
Not only okay to use, but really no consequence to having actually been caught.
Yeah, and go ahead and associate with drug addicts, drug dealers, do all this. You have the permission by the police to do all this now.
Oh,
that's right.
And then I never followed up with theirs. I was, I didn't have a mailing address for almost 5 years.
How? How does that happen?
It's a great way not to pay bills.
Yeah. Erik, I'm very curious about coming clean. Tell us about that experience.
So, January 5th, 2015, I don't remember any of it. I don't. I do remember I was exhausted, and I was literally out of options to use, right? I had no house, no car. I don't recall the last time I seen my kids, no food. A dear friend of mine, Bryce, who Talia knows from way back, he had a handful of my possessions in a storage unit he allowed me to keep in there. And that was it, nothing. And I was breaking into houses, stealing anything I could to eat. I mean, we went to the bars to go to people's barbecues outside of their patios and steal the propane tanks, because we knew a guy that would give us $20 a propane tank.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, it got to that level where I'm stealing people's propane tanks off their barbecuers in the middle of winter,
Yep.
in order to get enough money to get high for just that day. So I'm assuming now, because I'm 8-ish years removed from it, trying to recall back.
Which is not that long ago. You know what I mean? When you think about where you are in your life?
Yeah, for the recovery side of the story is the best part. That's what I love to share. But so at that moment, January 5th, I didn't use. Another dear friend of mine, I reached out to her Charmaine, everybody we went to prom with.
Oh, I was like, when you said
Easy?
Bryce, I was like, do I remember Bryce? Oh my God, Charmaine. Can I just tell you, first of all, she was stunning. I remember this was like my first like formal dance experience, and I was a city girl who I was wearing like, combat boots and like, I mean, they called me shit kicker. I was also like that club kid. And
We still do.
Grungy Nirvana, like weird vibe. But I went to that prom with you, and Charmaine was like, she was wearing foundation, which I'd never even seen makeup before. She looked so beautiful. She wore these like, she had really long fake nails and like tight,
fancy.
like she was so fancy. And I remember being like, oh my God, she looks like a woman. She was so beautiful. I remember her.
So my prom committee saved me at the so Charmaine, I just stayed on her couch for a couple weeks, right? And all I'd have to do was do 3 things. She gave me 3 things that each day to do, and she would bring me candy when she got home from work. God bless her for trusting me to stay at her house. But these 3 things, and it was those first couple weeks were almost impossible to get off that couch. I was. With narcotics, you don't get, like, with the opioids, you don't get, like, physically sick or anything like that. But the complete exhaustion, do the dishes, take a shower, and try to eat something. And those 3, just doing those 3 basic things almost felt impossible at first. It was the weirdest thing. From there, I had all kinds, because I never followed through with my court stuff and turning in people, blah blah blah. So I had a second-degree felony possession charge over my head. I knew I had to get clean, and at this time, I still haven't put myself into the rooms of recovery. At this point, I went to spend a couple months with my parents in Florida, got healthier there, and then came back to figure out how I'm going to do this, right? And at that point, then I found a recovery group, and then that's where my recovery story kind of goes from there. So,
tell us about what type of recovery group.
So the group I joined, it's a 12-step program, Narcotics Anonymous,
Okay.
And then of course everyone knows of AA, and there's crystal method. I went to any meeting I could. It didn't really matter at the point, but on the one I became a community member of, I should say, almost, was NA. So I started going recovery. I got a couple months clean, still no place to live, no job, no license, no car. And instead of sleeping at trap houses, drug houses, I was staying at these are people I just met. And I would sleep on their couches, futon mattress on the floor. They would give me rides to meetings, or I'd walk to meetings. Feed me, and like the biggest part about getting clean, well, not biggest, there's so many big parts, but the part was important for me in the beginning was finding humility, right?
Yes.
And humility and humiliation are completely 2 different things. So you had to fill your life with humility, and ask for help, and might be like more of a male, I don't know, I guess we both sexes do, but for a guy to ask for help, for me to ask for help, meant I had to be vulnerable. It's accepting, it's admitting that I have problems I can't handle on my own, right? And I need help. They became my family, and they took care of me. I'd go to fellowship after the meetings, and I would eat leftovers because I had nothing else, right? I had all kinds of court stuff that brought me to there. I was lucky. I got sentenced to 364 days, so I didn't have to go to prison. And then I got out of custody and in custody sentenced to service. The catch was, if you miss a day, they take all that time away, and then I'm going to go away locked up. There was a member of NA, or a member, I should say recovery. There was a member that gave me a ride every day, or made sure I had a ride every day. So I utilized 10 to 12 different people to make sure I got through this. And I replaced everything in my life. It's getting clean. There's you just have to replace one thing, and that's everything, right?
Oh my
People,
gosh.
places, and things. So,
I just want to say, I'm so curious because, We're Not Fine as a podcast kind of about relationships with ourselves, with others. I'm listening to your story and I realize you have 2 kids at this time, right?
Yep.
And so I'm very curious, like as you're spending 2 months in Florida, were you staying in contact? Were you absent?
I was staying in contact, and throughout my whole time of my addiction too, I would justify my use to myself, I suppose, because I would never use in front of them. I never drank in front of them. I never smoked in front of them. That was probably that inner dad thing. I lived in so many different places, at the time, before I became homeless and before I was, the last probably 2 years before I didn't really have anything. We moved around so much, but when they were with me, we always made sure we did like adventures, and it was a smoke and mirror show. And when I got arrested, Mother Jess, she told them, Dad got arrested for drug use, and that still didn't get me clean.
Right.
Being my children, it's like you'd think your children would be enough to get clean. And it's sad to say it isn't. It isn't. And why that is, that's that disease of addiction aspect of it. Court didn't get me clean. Like the fear of going to jail didn't get me clean. And the scary part about addiction is that if the addict doesn't choose it, very rarely the addict survives.
I had a client years and years and years ago who just talked about her experience of alcoholism, and she said a story of just like it feels like this, that if somebody just opened up the door to your house, had a gun to your head, and said, if you have one more drink of alcohol, I'm literally going to pull the trigger and kill you on the spot. And what she said was, I would definitely see how many gulps I could take before the bullet hit my brain. Like nothing was enough, right? And it's just this really, I think it's what you said is like, it's no longer fun. It just becomes this necessity. It's like breathing air or drinking water, and your world gets very, what is it called? Myopic, where it's like you only see.
That's a really big word.
It's a really big word. Erik, I'm really curious. Like, so you've got these 2 beautiful kids that you don't even remember really when you last saw them at this point in your life, that you were trying like smoke and mirrors. But then I feel like you have this do-over where you have 2 more children. And I know that you worked your ass off to like reconnect with your first 2 kids, and I'd love to know your experience. I mean, you were in a really dark time your first time around parenting. How is it different this time around, and how did you fix your relationship?
Yeah, we should share that you have like moved on to a new relationship and do have new kids. I don't know that was referenced before.
No,
just
good
to give
point.
some context.
I jumped ahead.
So skipping forward a couple years into, about 2 years into recovery, while I was clean, I met a woman in the program. All right, shot my shot, and she said yes. Like, whoa, way outkicked my coverage.
I understand she played hockey for Stillwater.
Hockey, Stillwater. Yeah, college hockey for Gustavus.
I need to meet her.
Anyway. I also feel like I need to meet her. And I mean, you definitely married up for sure, right? I'm just kidding. I love you, Erik.
Ouch. We're sorry to interrupt,
but she's
Erik.
She's spectacular.
My parents asked her what was wrong with her when she said I do, so it's all right. So I developed this. My wife's name is Kelsey, and she provided goals for me. Here's when you do marry up, like responsibility, expectations, and she is the first person in my life that has continued to make me a better person. And I still she'll put expectations on me, like, don't
right?
Expectations.
Boundaries, expectations.
right? But every time it happens, I level up in life.
Yeah.
My son was young enough. My firstborn son was young enough that he doesn't really remember it, and my older daughter Genevieve does, right? Uh, I don't know where she's forgiven me to the extent. I know it's a lot. She's forgiven me quite a bit, especially from being arrested on her birthday and then found out at a very young age that her dad was an addict and a criminal, etc. But when you live the recovery, not just getting clean or sober, but when you live in recovery, it teaches you like the integrity, like we said in the beginning when we started. It teaches you all these life skills and how to be a normal person living with this disease. So by me living right, Kelsey and I gave my two oldest children a foundation, a steady foundation that we could rebuild our lives on, and that our foundation was laid with recovery, right? So that's our recovery foundation. And I think it's just because they saw that I was getting better, not just doing better, but really getting better. And when they became to trust that this foundation isn't going to crack like every single one is in the past, that's where the amends started to happen. It wasn't my sorries meant nothing. Sorry I can't pick you up this weekend. I'm sorry Dad wasn't there. Sorry Dad missed that. They heard 1,000 sorries. My sorry that means nothing to nobody at this point, right? Where was I? Okay, so Kelsey and I started building this life, and they say when you get into recovery and get clean, you sometimes you get what you wish for. So now I have 2 more children because we got married. I call myself the rewipe father. I get a rewipe,
Wait, is that like re-wiping butts or like you wipe
rewipe
your record clean?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted clarification.
Yeah, rewipe. My oldest kids call me Grandpa Dad. I'm 40, almost 48 years old.
So cute.
2-year-old. Daughters are 20 years apart. Sons are 16 years apart. That's normal.
Oh my God.
But so now when they were born, when my 2-year-old was born, I did have a lot of mental health kind of issues. A lot, depression was sinking in, guilt, shame, because I'm realizing I'm going to be a different father this time around.
Oh, that's powerful.
So
I could imagine heartbreaking.
Yeah. So now I was, like I'm in recovery, supposed to be working on these past issues, but you're supposed to forgive yourself. You're supposed to do all this stuff, but you really, truly don't all the way. And I should say I didn't, I buried that guilt and shame and, again, smoke and mirrors. Maybe it's just my way of doing things, to protect myself from myself for feeling wise. And don't do it that way because it's super not healthy.
I mean, Erik, did you find that like with your little ones that when some of the mental health stuff was coming up for you, you were feeling like the guilt and the shame and the depression was bubbling up? Did you feel like it made you a little more withdrawn from your little ones, or did it make you push harder to be more connected with the elders, or kind of both, or neither?
Both a little bit. Like my oldest kids, like I pastured the heck out of them, right? Like they're like, oh my God, Dad, I didn't answer the phone. You called 15 times, or so like I became that helicopter parent over them, so it was like no parent to helicopter parent. So you
were making up for lost time,
right? Yeah. And there's different bad habits I developed there too, like spoiling them, buying them too much, trying to do that. But with Emmett and Annika now, the 2 new ones, like I said, I get a huge redo.
You get a huge redo, and as you talk about these different generations, I can imagine your older kids, and you kind of talked before, like maybe this is a work in progress, which it can be a work in progress for the rest of your life. Right. But I am curious if part of their issue is resentment that you're able to be there now for this next generation, but not for them. And do you?
Thank God,
Go ahead.
not. Or at least it's not been vocalized. Eli, my oldest son, is amazingly patient with both of them. My daughter Genevieve, she's got her busy life, 20 years old, but I don't see it at all. And there could be,
That's
and
great.
that's probably I should probably ask. I don't know. Ask her if
Sure.
you don't have it, because Genevieve and I have a really good open line of communication, right?
That's
We have
fantastic.
an honesty factor about us, and that's another, like, I'll try to refer to recovery as much as I can, because in recovery you learn how to be honest. As an addict,
Right.
when you're getting in and getting clean, addicts are not honest, right? I was the biggest liar I've ever met my entire life. And so now I have to change from being the biggest liar to being completely honest. And I have to do this change extremely fast, because lies keep us sick, right? We hide behind lies. And if I'm willing to lie about something, eventually I'm going to be willing to lie about use, as my trainer, how I was thinking. So with them, yeah, I need to have that conversation with Genevieve. Just to make sure
It might be, it's always a good idea, right, to check in,
yeah.
Just to see. But I love that you have that beautiful relationship with her.
Yeah.
And I am curious. So you've been clean and sober for 8 years now, right?
Yep, since January 5th, 2015. So
Incredible. And so, what would you even call the stage you're in now in recovery? Are there obstacles? Is it still hard every day? Do you feel like, oh, I've got this in the bag, I don't ever think about it anymore? Or is it a daily?
No, that's a slippery slope to
Okay.
think that you have it in the bag.
Okay.
Right? Because I never will. I will always, you're in recovery. You're never recovered. Ever, 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 ever. So once you think you have it, addiction will take it away from you. And I've seen, being in the rooms as long as I've been in, I've seen people with long-term sobriety, clean time, go back out. 14 years, 20 years, go back out. And the disease of addiction, when you go back out after having long-term sobriety, got stronger. They one of the things they always say, it's out in your addiction's out in the parking lot doing push-ups, getting ready for you to come
Oh, God.
back.
But
And
that's
you
a
go
good
back-
reminder.
Yeah, you go back right where you left off, not back to the party days, the fun days, and you make up for lost time, and you don't even realize what you're doing it.
Which goes back to the one day at a time kind of mantra, right?
Yeah.
This is one day at a time. It's not about anticipating 10 years away.
Yeah.
I want to jump back a little bit into some history a little bit. And so I'm shifting gears entirely, but I'm curious, number one, Erik, if there's any family of origin tendencies toward this, that you followed some patterns. I also want to know, just generally, while we talked about how you got into this, thank you for the smile. I'm very curious, what you think was going on internally for you, that, we talk about the HALT method, hunger, anger, lonely, tired, as kind of oftentimes what people utilize, have as a sort of framework for what gets them into use and what causes relapse and whatnot. I'm curious about those two questions for you.
Yeah.
Let's go family of origin. Go ahead.
Yeah, family origin. Both my parents were addicts, alcoholics, addicts. Broken home, and I would literally put my kids through what I was put through. And that's one of those things that I'm sure at some point in time in my history, I'm like, I'll never raise my kids the way I did. I love both my parents. I have my mom, another part of recovery too. I kind of, like I said, I'll jump around. I'm going to jump here first. So I was about 9 months clean, right? And just got out of serving a little bit of jail time, with more jail time coming up. And when I got out, I found out that my mom had lung cancer, and she got diagnosed while I was in jail. I got out, and 1 month after I got out, she died.
Oh my God, Erik, I'm so sorry.
Right? And so I was so angry. And I don't know if I really I wanted to get drunk. I'm like, alcohol hadn't been a part of my life for a long time because it was all drugs. And I wanted to get drunk, and I wanted to fight. That's all I kept thinking. My recovery family surrounded me, protected me. My mom's funeral. Now, these are people I've got less than a year relationship, if a couple weeks. My mom's funeral was 75% of people in recovery, 25% family friends. It was unbelievable.
But so like the humility and the community envelop you at the same time. Like that's the price that you pay for the community of people that are ride or die, like that they would drop everything to be there for you. I mean, it's incredible.
And speaking of the community is like I always tell people when they get involved into any type of recovery group, you have to be vulnerable. You have to show that humility. You have to be honest, and you have to, you don't get help unless if you ask for it, right? And nobody's entitled, just because you're in the same meeting, nobody's responsible for helping you, right? So ask everybody. And even if you don't seem like you like them, you might need them. They might be the only person that answers the phone. And you're sitting in a parking lot. You're like, I don't really like that guy. You get their number anyways, because he might save your life, or she might save your life.
It makes me wonder about, I mean, just so if you're talking about that, when you start using, then drugs or alcohol become the number one coping mechanism for feelings or discomfort or anxiety or anger or frustration, all of the things. And so it's almost like you have to start from scratch figuring out how to even how to cope without drugs and alcohol.
That's right where my brain went. I went to, I wasn't going to go pick up crystal meth or cocaine or whatever, because that would numb me. I wanted to amplify those feelings with alcohol.
Like you wanted to fight.
I know what alcohol, I'm like, when I get drunk, I get angry. And when I get drunk, I get mean, right? And that's where my brain jumped to. Wow. I'm hurting. I want to hurt back. So how do you go through life with that mind frame, and how do you change it? And that's where, like I said earlier, well, I'm going to jump over. I'll go back to growing up, right?
Please.
With the disease of addiction, way before active use, and this is something I've realized and understand about myself now. Talia probably saw this as my teenage years. I had to have attention at all times. So I want usually the negative attention got me the most attention. But I would feel alone in a crowded room. I could be the class clown, and I was put myself, there's typically one class clown. So as a class clown, you're alone, right? I was in wrestling, football, tennis, but I was never felt I was good enough. Never thought people actually really liked me. And so at a very, very young age, all the addict signs were there, right? And so they say it's a disease of addiction. And it took me a long time to accept that, because my son's type 1 diabetic. Now that's a disease, right? And my sponsor was like, well, Eli needs insulin in order to live, right? He goes, you think maybe your insulin's recovery? Because if you don't have recovery, you're not going to live either. And then with the disease of addiction too, and this is just my opinion, I don't know, I don't read as many books as Talia has in here, but
those are all for show. I told you, 75%.
Yeah, there's no
of
pages in those.
Right? they, as they open up, never been opened. I look at the disease of addiction as basically a touch of every mental health problem, all put in one, right? You have anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. You get a touch of every single one, and they just put it in addiction. And there's no, you can't medicate an addict. Like my dad, it was funny. My dad sent me a while back, like it was a picture of there's 2 pills type thing, and one, if you take just one, it was one pill. There's a cure for addiction and a pill, and then the next page it was said the addict would say, well, what if I took 2? So you could take one pill to cure addiction, but the addict would say, well, I want to see what happens if I take 2. Right?
Like this never enough feeling, or like how far can I take it? Like a bottomless pit of some
like
sort of
one
need.
One is too many, thousands enough. They're never enough.
Okay. Okay.
You know, Erik, one of the things that is so powerful about what you said when you went back to family of origin is that you did recreate this pattern in your adulthood. And it's what we do when we have no other way of knowing how to cope or what else to do. So we get this guidebook on how to live our life, and we naturally and organically go after it because it's what our natural tendency is, and it's what we're shown. And you didn't get shown other ways of coping at the time. I'm very curious if you could look back, and I realize this is always, in retrospect, the magic question, but if you knew yourself now as a teenager, what would you tell yourself?
Right?
I love that question.
Like, well, I would. Here's the thing: where my life is today.
Yeah.
And taking Evie and Eli, the oldest kids, out of it because of their way they grew up, So if I remove them out of the feeling aspect, because of recovery and because of the work I've done, I would tell them not to change anything because my life has gotten to a life so blessed and so rewarding. So what would I risk removing? Because I might not have what I have today. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
I'd be scared to take anything out of it because I wouldn't want nothing to change.
We wouldn't be where we are today, assuming that's a good place, and it is for you.
And
I have a very similar story as well, not in terms of any sort of substance abuse, but coming out and being honest with who I am. Like when we get honest with who we are and we live that healthy life, and we live every day openly and honestly, every single piece of our puzzle that gets us to that place had to happen. The people we dated, the people we engaged with, the things that we've done that have been maybe were illegal, like stealing jelly beans from a Jerry's food market.
Hey,
that never took place.
It all had to happen, right?
Fake
news.
I
love what you said because you wouldn't have what you have. And I also want to say, going back to like the relationships you have with your ex and the mother of your children and your older children and your current wife, hockey player from Stillwater, go Ponies. The reality is that none of that would be the case if you hadn't gone through this journey the way you are, but it's tough.
Right.
And there is constantly work to get, maintain that health, I think. So I love your answer. It's good.
Okay, Erik, I do want to, I'm reframing Doug's question. Okay, because I loved that answer so much.
She didn't like your question enough, Doug.
Evidently
so
not.
I'm pivoting.
That's common.
You know what? I loved the question, adored the answer, but I want to know something slightly different. I'm thinking about your 4 kids. If one of your kids, I know, literally cannot believe it. If one of your kids started heading down a dangerous, slippery, familiar path, and you saw this, would you have a different, I know right now you're saying I wouldn't change a thing because look at my blessed life. If you saw one of your kids starting to sniff around and go down a direction that you know all too well, what would you say to them? How would you approach it?
Well, with my oldest with Evie, she's had different struggles, and I won't, this is, and her story wise. So that was kind of a tough one because we kind of been there a little bit.
Okay.
So I'd say referring to all 4 was if we keep her story out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
And she's doing amazing.
Good. Yay,
better
Evie.
Than amazing. It's a tough one because as an addict, I know that if I didn't want to get clean, I wouldn't get clean no matter who said what. I ignored all advice. I ignored everything. And so, and I know that, and I believe that true and blue to my heart. The only person who can help an addict is himself. And if an addict's mad at you, you're helping that addict. If an addict's happy with you or an addict loves you, you're enabling that addict.
So there's no winning. It's a lose-lose trying to address it.
I don't want to say lose-lose because I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people win their battle of addiction, type. So I know it's a different question. So I don't want to say lose because there is a way out. It's
for sure.
There's a way out. But when it comes to our loved ones, when for me being an addict, I would guilt I would use every advantage I could to pull on friends and loved ones' emotions in order to get what I wanted from them. So the only time they would ever see me happy or happy with them would be as if I'm getting something so I can continue using. So going into it with the kids and being a parent to that, we identify the signs.
Which are what? Like, what would you be looking for?
Being distant, being depressed, and my two oldest children have the signs of addiction, and it's, if it'll turn into active use where they never recover, that isn't up to me. We were born with free will,
that makes me panicky because I feel like I've got a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I feel like I literally want them on surveillance, and I want to shake them and be like, wake up, like whatever you do not go down this path, like don't do it.
It doesn't matter. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what we say, but like with Evie and Eli building this life on Recovery Foundation now, right? I'm showing them the path to redemption. Or now with Annika and Emmett, Kelsey and I get to raise them in a stable environment, in a loving environment, an environment where they have our attention, where they don't have to go seek it elsewhere. When Annika falls asleep, I did this with Evie a lot too. When Annika, before bed, I always whisper to her, "You're enough. You're strong." And she's 8 months old.
That makes me want to cry. Literal
I'm going to whisper these things. I did it with Evie too. I'm going to whisper them. So, when it comes to your daughter-wise, it's like I look at it to the point where, that's the first time a guy's ever said that to me. That will never happen because the first guy who's ever said it to him is dad, right? This is stuff that they've heard and they know, and they're not even going to know how they know it. So when it comes to that recovery, the apple doesn't fall, your addiction, the apple doesn't fall far from its tree. Well, I get to plant this tree and have these new apples on top of a damn hill. So they have to, the apples are going to travel away from that tree. So it's not a matter of what we say. It's a matter of what we do.
Oh
really.
My God.
As a fellow dad, Erik, I applaud you for that effort and being as expressive of yourself emotionally as that. It's really critical we model that as well. So really nice work. It's a nice story. I loved it.
I'd love to ask one last question before we sort of wrap. I mean, what a powerful episode.
We're going to wrap? Yeah.
Is that RAP? Yeah, we're going to wrap. You're going to beatbox and I'm just going to... So what words of advice would you give to someone who actually might be feeling like this might be a problem for me? I don't know what to do. I think I need to look at my substance use, or maybe a loved one. I think my loved one is having issues. What advice would you give them?
There's so much different advice you can give, and so you could overwhelm people with advice, so that you can overwhelm them so much that just getting through that advice seems like it's climbing up a mountain. When you dig your hole of addiction, that's a huge part of trying to get clean, is that you have to look, I haven't paid bills for years. Like I said, I had a mailing address for 5 years. So you look at that as a reason not to get clean, right? It's way too hard. It's easier to use. That's the addiction. Addiction lies here. This is a good friend of mine, Joe, always says. He goes, "I have a disease that lies to me every day using my own voice."
Oh my God!
So if you hear your own voice telling you this lie, you're gonna believe it. But you have to acknowledge that it's a lie. And I tell my daughter Genevieve too. I say, biggest thing I say to her, I say it a lot to her. Feelings are not facts. Because you feel something doesn't make it true at all. And we call them Mortimer bad head days. She'll text me, "Bad head day, Dad. Mortimer head day." And my response, feelings aren't facts, right? What do we need to do? What do we need to do to convince you? So trying to convince somebody to get clean, for me, there's only one way, and that's finding recovery. It really is. Like we had talked a little bit before, I think before we started, people get, some clean time or sobriety at treatment facilities or in jails, and that jail time counts when you when you get clean. But you need recovery in order to survive. Recovery isn't about getting clean; it's about teaching you how to stay clean, as much as it is how to live life without the use of drugs, and to show up when it feels like you can't show up for anybody. It gives you a reason just to do something. I don't know how to word it, but the advice would be that go to a meeting. Go to a meeting. You don't have to say nothing, and you're gonna be scared. Most people are scared, but you show up and you just listen, and then you do it the next day, and then you do it the next day, and then if you make a plan like, hey, I'm going to go to a meeting every night at 7, I wake up and I just have to stay clean or sober till the meeting. Make that your goal. Okay, I can't go to the meeting high, I can't go to the meeting drunk, so I got to stay clean and sober. And then I guarantee you, if you go to that meeting, you're probably just going to go eat and go back to bed. I shouldn't say guarantee, but there's a very good chance you just gave yourself a goal, and the next goal is, hey, just go to bed. And now you got a day clean. Now you got 2 days clean. Now you got 2 weeks clean. My clean date, January 5th, 2015, Evie, actually my oldest daughter, tattooed it on her. So I'm like, oh God, now I got to stay clean.
Oh my
God. On you. Why did you do that? But so clean dates on that, from that day one, when you choose to get clean. Or even if someone chose it for you, that date is extremely important, because that's when I got clean. That was the only possession I had, right? For my own individual possession, I didn't have nothing. I have a date. Well, I need to protect that. If I protect that, I will develop a life worth living.
It's like there wasn't a single person who could take that away from you. You had earned it, and it was like every day, one step at a time.
Yeah.
God,
and then,
Erik.
And so it's a choice. Like, it was a choice for me to, I don't know if I necessarily chose to get clean, but I chose to go to that meeting. And I chose to be honest, and I chose to ask for help. Those are choices that I didn't have an opportunity to choose when I was in active addiction. Because with addicts, we choose to pick up. We choose to use. I chose to get high. But once you make that choice, unless if you don't have the disease of addiction, once you make that choice, that first choice, you lose being able to choose again. That addiction takes over, and now you don't choose to get high the second day. You're in active addiction, and that choice got taken away from you. And like for me, it was like, like you said, my headlights only went to the end of my nose, type of a thing.
And what I think about is that you were showing up for yourself maybe the first time ever in your life. That was like your first step towards health. I mean, Erik, you are remarkable. I can't even imagine the amount of, strength and for stick-to-itiveness that it would take to just one day at a time. I'm so grateful that you came on today, like incredibly grateful that you shared your story. I'm sure it's so relatable, and so many people are going to benefit from hearing this.
I realize we could go on and on in so many different ways about this story, and I have so many more questions I could ask you specifically, and I didn't get the privilege of going to prom with you, but I feel like I know you a lot better in this hour of conversation.
Next time.
I learned that I might have made out with Talia once, but I mean, I have enough time in the day here. We can have that first kiss too. You know what I mean?
It's never too late.
Don't
Doug.
tempt me.
You're single.
Don't tempt me, buddy.
Oh my gosh, Erik, you're the best. And thanks again so much. And I
thank you.
Can't wait to just hear all the responses to your incredible story. And
here's the last part about this too. Like, this keeps me clean today, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I share my story, or if I get a responsibility within recovery, service work, etc., what I'm horrible at right now. But like for this to me today was my recovery for today. This filled my cup up to a point, and and then just by doing something outside, I was pretty comfortable. But doing things outside your your comfort level, is extremely important. Extremely.
And making yourself of service to others. Like you've helped so many people just by being so vulnerable.
I should be helping
and
more.
Humble.
Yeah,
shame.
Eric, you are
shame.
enough. You are enough.
Just kidding. You are enough. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Eric. We're so
Thank you so
grateful.
much, Eric, for your story.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.